Okay, welcome. Now again, there's been some confusion. There are two separate selectmen's races. One is for the 3-year term, one is for the 2-year term. You have to select who you believe best represents you and your views from each. Do not pick two from one, because that won't work. And I know a lot of times people think about, when we have 2 openings on the school committee, 4 people run, the top 2 get it. So they vote for 2.
That's
Here,
right.
you cannot vote for 2 out of 4 or 5. You have to pick 1 from each main food group, the 3-year and the 2-year. So tonight, we're going to talk to 2 people who are of a special group in Milford. Many of us like to say, shoulda, coulda, woulda. It should be done this way. Not enough of us stand up and say, not only do I believe it should be done this way, but I'm willing to give time, energy, and everything involved to help make it a little bit better, to improve life at the center of the universe. So tonight, I'll start with my hats are off. You all have done a lot already, but thank you for stepping up and offering to do more.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very
So
much.
let's start with introductions.
Hi, my name is Mike Walsh, and I'm a current chairman of the Milford School Committee, seeking to become the next selectman on the 2-year term. As Al explained, that is, there are 2 different races, a 3-year and a 2-year race. I'm in the 2-year race.
And hello, I'm Harold Rhodes. I too am a candidate for the 2-year selectman position. Lived in Milford for 37 years. Our daughter went to Milford High School, graduating in 2006. I've been chairman of the Commission on Disability, and in that position had a chance to do some very helpful things around the community, one of which many people know, bringing transportation to Milford. I've served on the Shining Star School Council. I've been a member of the Milford Healthcare Foundation and a variety of other places. Milford's a very important part of our lives. We care deeply about this community as it's done so much for us.
Okay, order of questions. Harold, pick 1 to 10, pick a number.
2.
Michael?
3.
4. You get the first question.
All right.
As you've experienced me harassing you on other shows, I'm from Milford, Michael. Why should I vote for you?
Al, I answer that question the same way every time you have me on this show. My leadership style, my management style, the results that I produce, but more importantly, it's my community. And I care. And you and I talked about this many times, but last week we talked about it. My children were grown and out of the district when I ran for school committee. And people said to me, why do you care? Why do you want to run for school committee now? And I said, because I care. Because I didn't want them in the district when I was lucky enough to sit on the school committee. And now I have people going around town saying to me, at your age, why do you want to be a selectman? Well, because I care. I care. It's my community. I think that to collaboratively with some very good members on the school committee, we've done some wonderful things. We put together the renovation committee. We renovated the youth center. 150 children a day are going there now. And to me, this is just the next step to me to helping the community that's been so good to myself and to my family.
Harold, I'm from Milford. Why should I vote for you?
Al, as people have a chance to consider the appropriate person to serve this 2-year seat, I think there are 3 things that a voter should consider. The first thing is the person's availability. Does the candidate have the time to put into being a selectman? Selectman is a tremendous job. It has so many activities involved with it. Over the last 3 years, having attended nearly all the selectmen meetings, learning so much about what each of the selectmen does, not just at the one selectman meetings, but what they do in between. So it's important that the selectmen chosen have that full-time availability. I have that full-time availability. I have no other commitments to any other commissions, boards, committees. I have the complete desire to be a full-time selectman for our town of Milford. The second topic is whether a candidate has a learning curve. And there's a lot to know about being a selectman. There are town departments, there are regulations, there are issues, there are so many things that, again, the only way a person can learn is by being in the selectmen's meetings and attending all of the various department meetings and sitting in with all of the different groups. And I've had that chance to spend time with I would say nearly all, if not all, of the different groups. Even this week I was with the chief of police and the fire chief to learn their particular needs. And finally, the thing I think that is most important about becoming a two-year selectman is whether a person can bring a fresh perspective. We've been living in Milford with many people running our town who have had considerable expertise, but the same expertise working with the same people for many, many years. Mine is just a fresh perspective without any encumbrances. So having the ability to be a full-time selectman, having the ability to bring a fresh perspective, and having no learning curve, I think qualifies me to be the next selectman.
If I may, you and I had this conversation the other night, Al, and I hate to keep coming back to that, but you said to me that the school committee seems to be the proving grounds for the Board of Selectmen. And my response to you was, well, one of the most important things is the school budget's the largest budget in town. As you said, over 60 million. 62%. $60 million. And so as a school committee member, you as well get to work closely with all different departments, especially when you just built a brand new school. So you've got the planning board, the zoning board, okay? And that's important. But one thing that you have to, and you learn this as a school committee member, some do, some don't, but as a school committee member, you have 3 areas of responsibility: budget, policy, and hiring and firing of the superintendent. And the same thing is when you become a selectman. You have certain areas that you are responsible for and certain areas that you have to leave up to the department heads that you put in those positions to do their job.
Harold, you get the next question. 3 biggest challenges you see for the selectmen, for the town selectmen, whichever way you want to phrase it.
Having been on the outside of the management of the town for so many years, I've had a chance to talk with, the ordinary people that live in Milford and have the day-to-day concerns of what is of their mind, what are the things that they would like to see fixed. The first and foremost, without a doubt, is our traffic. Now, we know that over the last 10, 15 years, none of our roads have gotten bigger, but the traffic situation in Milford has gotten considerably worse. And for all intents and purposes, without a leadership by the Board of Selectmen, it is going to continue to get worse. The second area that people in Milford are very concerned about, that I hear about when I'm knocking on doors, is the state of how our downtown looks. We all have our feelings about downtown, but we all know that we should have the kind of downtown that looks as well as any of the other communities. We should have a welcoming downtown. Now, that's just a question of the selectmen having the will and the leadership to put together the right persons from the different stakeholders to bring an appropriate investment into our downtown to make it that kind of welcoming place. The third area that everyone agrees to is the lack of transparency within Town Hall. It's very hard to learn, if you're on the outside, it's very hard to learn what's going on in the different committees. While there are minutes posted, sometimes they're posted late, and sometimes, and most times, they're not posted with all the materials that are presented at the meeting. So you really, if you want to try to get engaged, you have no way to be engaged because there's nothing there. So you get turned off, and you say, I'm not going to get involved. The trick to getting people involved is getting them engaged, and that is the way to do it. So traffic downtown is first and foremost. Second, clean or traffic across the community, making a more welcoming downtown, and making town hall more engaging.
Michael, 3 big challenges.
More than 3. Stormwater management. We spoke about it. My biggest concern is that why the town of Milford, the town of Franklin, and the town of Bellingham out of the entire state. As you and I discussed, we didn't just start making fertilizer. And I go back to years ago when, they had gas stations that had dirty soil, and all that soil was taken out of the ground and hauled all the way up to New York, Tonawanda, New York, for billions and billions of dollars. And then somebody came up with the idea, well, why don't we just put it on the side of the gas station, cover it with a tarp, and every so often flip it with a backhoe because gasoline evaporates after all that money was spent. I fear the same thing is going to happen to the town of Milford if we get caught in this stormwater management, that 10 years down the road, someone's going to say, you know what, that really wasn't necessary because we can do this. And a concern that I have with the EPA is that the EPA really, truly doesn't answer to anybody. So they can come in and tell you what you're going to do when you really don't have anybody else to turn to. So I think stormwater management is important. Whether people want to talk about it or not, it's not coming tomorrow and it's not coming next year, but there's a high school situation
But you
coming.
can appeal the EPA decision to the EPA management.
Yes. Yeah.
Kind of an interesting...
Makes a lot of sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, okay, I don't like what you said, so let me ask your boss
Right.
if it makes sense.
Right. The high school is another one. And the high school, you would, as you have said many times over the years that you and I have talked on the show, you were the first class out of there.
Yep.
Okay? And although we've done a lot of repairs to it over the years with the help of Rob Quinn, we know at some point that's going to have to get on the plan. So you've got that. Okay? Middle School East. Yes, the school committee surplused it as of June 30th. We've decided that as a school department, we have no use for it anymore. But does the town have a use for it? We talk about town hall, you have people sharing offices.
And I'm going to hold you because we're going to go specific question on middle school.
Okay.
East.
And you got the town hall paying for storage of boxes off, out of town. So could the two come back together to the table and say, could you have a use for the gym? Could you have a use for the classrooms? Could we get Shining Star out of the basement of the high school? Things like that, and the town takes some of the responsibility on it. So that's another one. I think another one that's everybody's really watching very closely is the water company.
And again, we'll have a specific question to discuss.
And I got to tell you, $63 million, and I know the physical plant on Dilla Street's in good shape, but what about all the older streets in town? What concerns me is the infrastructure. So if a pipe breaks and we open up the road and now the gas main's got a problem and the electric's got a problem, well, if we buy that water company, that's on the 3 of us. Right now it's on a private entity. And what's the worst that can happen? They raise our rates a little bit? That's what I see.
Okay. Since we started it, let's go middle school east.
Mm-hmm.
You get that question.
I feel that there definitely is a use for the town. I feel that, people say to me all the time, well, you just renovated that armory, you got that big, beautiful gym in there. Yes, we do. But yet you and I have had a conversation when we had to get help to get Special Olympics into the gym in the armory, but yet across the street, the gym's still being used every single night. And when we decided to surplus it, we stated as a school committee, we weren't going to pull the plug on it the night we voted. We were going to go to the end of the year to give the groups that were using it the opportunity to either A, find space in the fall, or figure out what they're going to do. So there's definitely a use for the building. Is it going to need some work? It's going to need some work. But could we get central office out of the high school? Central office used to be the nurse's station. We turned it into central office because we ran out of space. Your central office shouldn't be in your high school. Your central office shouldn't be in any school, okay? Because then it can't be a central office, okay? So could we pull the central office out of the high school? I said earlier, could we pull Shining Star out of the basement of the high school and give the high school that space to run the programs that Kerry Bonark wants to bring to the high school? Right now, she has no room to bring any more programs in. And then does the town have a use for it? Could we take people from town hall? Could we move them over there? Could we move community use into that building? I feel, Mike Walsh personally feels that that building has a use in the town of Milford. And I go one step farther, having worked with Aldo Chakey and Jonathan Bruce on the building of the new Woodland School, and Jonathan Bruce said to me one day, he said, you know what, when they closed the old high school, they didn't knock it down, they boarded it up. And what happened? Years later, we opened it up, renovated it, Stacy Middle School. So, as I said the other night, once it's gone, it's gone.
The word surplus, and I'm going to ask you the same question. People are saying, what does that mean, surplus?
It means we have no use for it. The school department we have no function for use of that building at all. We don't have any programs that we would want to put into that building. You know, we don't want to spend any money on it, you know.
But you're still paying for 60% of it.
We are, absolutely.
Because you get, well, when you're on the school committee gets 62% of our budget.
Right.
So if we spend $100,000 maintaining the building.
Right. But once we surplus it, we give it back to the town.
So it's really responsibility.
Right. And now it becomes the decision of the Board of Selectmen. So June 30th, the school committee surpluses it. It goes back to the Board of Selectmen, whoever is lucky enough to be sitting in that room that night, and the Board of Selectmen's got to make a decision. What are we going to do? Are we going to call the school committee back and say, hey, let's see if we can't work something out here, or are we going to work with a realtor, or are we going to knock it down? That's what they have to do.
Harold, Middle School East.
Well, first, in a friendly way, I have some disagreements with Mike on this that we've talked about. But before I talk about those disagreements, I did want to talk about and further expand upon what I talked about, a revitalized and much more welcoming downtown. And at this point in time, we have tremendous opportunity now by using the space at Middle School East, the space or the land at Middle School East, as well as the space at Archer Rubber, to bring real economic revitalization to Milford. And by using that space in both those areas as keystones, as prime drivers to bring in new persons, whether living in Milford or dining in Milford, with additional parking in Milford, this is one of those moments where if we make the right choice, for generations, people will be appreciating the fact what we've done with the available space in our community. The specifics about Middle School East, to me, come down to this. The school committee has had several years to consider what to do with Middle School East. And it has, over that time, spent tens of thousands of dollars maintaining Middle School East while making that decision. It spent in excess of $40,000 on a consultant study. It was a very good consultant study, but at the end of the day, the consultant study did not provide an answer to the school committee as to what to do with that. So the ideas that were presented are the same ideas that were presented several years ago and decided by the school committee not to be done and then to surplus it. The other ideas of the town making use of it, if we heard from the previous fellows speaking, they all indicated that making the town make use of that space is probably not economically feasible because of wanting to make the town in two separate areas, keeping all of our customers together. So if I should be so lucky to be elected to the town to the Board of Selectmen, what I would immediately do is move to have the town find developers to redevelop that land into a piece of property that would spur economic development into downtown Milford that would be the driver for further enhancements into Milford. I believe that that's an incredibly valuable piece of land, both for economic development and for parking, that we would see tremendous benefits over the next generations.
One of the problems that we have, Al, is that when the Woodland School building project was accepted, as you know, part of that project was the superintendent, Dr. Tremblay at the time, said that middle school east was going to be surplused. That was part of the deal. So therefore, for that 7 or 8 year period that Harold speaks about, that it took to get it through the Mass School Building Association, shovels in the ground, and the new school built, minimum money was spent on that school to keep it functionality, because it was going to be surplus. So that's when you walk through that school, that's one of the issues that we have now, is that we didn't really spend any money on it. Okay, we spent minimum money on it, and so now it's even in worse condition than it was when they went to build the new school. And you know, that's one of the hurdles that, you know, that we know. When we toured it as a school committee, that we walked around and we said, you know, yikes. But the other thing is and to Harold speaks to the survey that was done, I'm not going to say that the survey was weak. But what I'm going to say is that in every single school committee member that you talk to will tell you, you read the whole thing, and you get to the end of it, and you're like, well, what are they telling us?
Right.
What are they saying? I mean, we paid you a good amount of money to come forth and tell us this is what you think we should do, and instead they gave us ideas. Well, we didn't want ideas. We spent the money for you to tell us.
From the FinCom point of view, the question came up was, so?
Exactly.
You know, it's like, it reminded me of that old commercial where IBM consultants gave out some ideas, and the CEO says, do it. And they looked at each other and said, we don't do it. We just give you ideas.
Right.
But, you know, I walked away from that saying, okay, who are we going to sell it to, or where's the beef?
Right. Exactly.
And there was nothing in there that said, here are the 3 really top areas that we can focus on. Here are the potential customers.
Right.
It was just kind of the party of the first part and the party of the second part met and had a party with the party of the third part.
And
Yes.
I think what's even interesting to me, and this is just Mike Walsh, and you and I talk about it, you have 3 selectmen that are all former school committee members. You got the school committee. We're trying to decide what we're going to do with this building. You think we'd all get together and say, you know, have some conversation and say, hey, what do you think, you know, what do you think we should do with this thing, you know?
One of the questions, Harold, to you now, I asked is, we have 3 selectmen. Is that the right number? Is that the optimum number?
Oh, I think so, definitely. You know, I think we've witnessed in Franklin and in other communities that either have city council or selectmen, when you get to 5, you know, you always need an odd number, 5 or 7, it becomes unwieldy. And with 3, you can have a congenial conversation that brings together different points of view and expresses them in a good fashion, and a decision is made, and it moves on. And the folks remain good friends afterwards. With larger, probably not. Just somebody feeling on the outs.
Michael, 3?
Couldn't agree more. I sit in some of these meetings at town hall, and I look at all the members, and I'm like, this needs to be trimmed. I mean, you know, 3 is great.
Well, think about, we tried trimming the FinCom from 15, and we couldn't get a consensus to agree. You know, and a lot of it was if somebody gets sick. You know, that's always the worry is,
Yeah.
when you got 3 and one gets sick, you only have 2. You better hope they're working together real well.
Well, I think, you know, Al, to that point, though, because I've asked that question many, many times over the years, you know, having been before the FinCom, for the school, for the youth center, and, you know, and I look at the 15 members and I say, you know, how did it ever get to be that? And you've been there for forever, so you know, it was back when it was pen and paper. and one FinCom member had the police department, one FinCom had the fire department, you know, and so you needed that many members. But now I say to myself, with technology, do we? And you would have to answer that question better than me, but
Publicly, I went out and said, no.
yeah.
We don't need 15, you know, that we can easily operate with a smaller
Yeah,
group.
and I don't want anybody on FinCom to say that
Well,
I'm
no.
going to cut it, but I'm just saying is that, you know, you asked the question, do I think that the Board of Selectmen is 3 members is the right number? Absolutely, it's the right number.
Now, you get the next question.
Yes.
For 15 years, we followed a long-range ed plan.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we don't have one now? And we don't have a long-range town plan?
Right now, the school committee is working on the next long-range educational plan, and Johnny Erickson is part of it.
So now, how valuable do you think those are?
Very, very. The school district in Milford would not be where it is today if it wasn't for that long-range educational plan. And the final cap to it all was the new Woodland Elementary School. No doubt about it. Think about it. You were on the FinCom, Brookside, got renovated. I was part of it, you know.
High school,
Yeah.
Memorial,
Yeah.
Well, again, this is something that Mike and I have talked about. Yes, I certainly believe in long-range plans, but having spent 25 years in high technology and senior management, different positions before, making my time providing my volunteering to the community, we would never do a 15-year plan. We would do a plan that would continually evolve. So we might have a 15-year plan, but as soon as that first year were done, you'd add on the next year. And then when the second year is done, you'd head on to the next year. So you would always have a 15-year plan, but it would be continually evolving based upon what you've learned in the previous years. So that we wouldn't come to a spot where we are with the town or with the school where we're just out of plan. We don't know what we're supposed to be doing. We have different ideas, and I'm sure Dr. McIntyre and his team will do a very fine job developing that plan. But if I were town selectman, speaking just for the town, we would have a rolling long-range plan. And that's what's done in every major corporation, so as to always stay ahead and always knowing where we're going. And that encompasses not just the activities, but it encompasses succession plans, it encompasses financing, it encompasses every issue that, you didn't think about last year, but now we need to think about it and we need to plan for it, such as what we're doing right now for capital planning.
I'll come back to you in a second on this, but is that practical? I mean, we come from industry, all 3 of us, and people keep telling me, well, it's different in municipal. And when I look at 12 years ago, we started saying there's a school coming. And we knew it would take 8 or 10 years, and we'll have a specific question about the high school coming up. But don't you have to look 8, 10 years out? Because we're not going to do Woodland. We talk about it being 61. Well, our piece was 34, and that was enough.
Right.
But we have, in my mind, we have to start planning, because people kept saying, "Why do you have such a big stabilization account?" There's a school coming.
That's right.
So do you think?
So I'm in complete agreement with what you're saying, Al. We should have a 15-year plan. But when we get done with year 1 of the 15-year plan, you add on, let's call it year 16.
So there is a plan. It's
So
always 15.
It's called a rolling
Okay.
15-year plan, as Mike would well say. In a few years, we're going to do something with Milford High School. But there's going to be something after that. We 3 know it. We may not know what it is, but we need to start putting it on the radar. Maybe not this year, maybe not next year, but in a couple of years, we should put that out there to say, in 10, 12 years, that's going to be the next big thing. So again, in corporations, very much like I would hope to bring to municipal government, is a rolling plan so that it is always up to date as to where we plan to be and easily just adjusted as time goes on.
I think the easiest way to answer that is the FinCom's capital plan. That's exactly what Harold's just speaking about, is we get from you, and, you know, and we do. We have a 5 and a 10, and we put it all together, and then we meet and you say, okay, this may go here, this may not go there. So we do, in fact, have that. But to answer your point about municipal government, I'll never forget the first year I got elected to school committee, and I would be frustrated, and I would say to a former selectman, John Pine, I said, John, why can't we just go in and, he says, because it's municipal government. I said, well, what do you mean by that? He said, you have to take your private industry hat off and put on your municipal government hat, because they're two totally different functioning. And as much as you think that he, as you knew, worked for digital for years, you think you can go in and you can make this run like a private entity? You can't.
Well, you can't go and say, Kevin, this is the right thing to do. I need $22.80 to implement it.
Right.
And have King Kevin of Imperial say, do it.
Right.
And that's probably the hardest thing to get used to, is the rules and, you know, for...
The governing rules.
Yeah.
I mean, you can appreciate this being on the finance committee. What is the only, or one of the only line items that you can transfer late in the year? Salt and sand.
Snow and ice, the only one you can overspend.
Who ever thought of that? I mean, there's nothing else more important that might need to be paid, but snow and ice.
And the only one you can overspend, because technically you're on the hook if you overspend your budget.
Right. So I'm saying, you know, you sit there and look at it and you say, well, that doesn't make any sense to me, privately in private business. You know, the poor police chief gets into a bad winter, he's got car damage, he's got excessive fuel, he's got excessive overtime, and...
Sorry, Tom, you don't count.
Figure it out, you know.
And Mike, that's just the point. It's a 15-year plan. It's not a 15-year operating budget.
Right.
It's a 15-year plan. It lays out the major considerations that a community or a business should be concerned with. I'll point to two. The first one is succession planning. We know in town government we're coming up to the need that some folks are going to be retiring soon. Mm-hmm. We don't know when, you know, or we don't want to say exactly how, but we should be thinking about today, what is that transition plan going to look like should it happen the next year or the year after? How are we going to bring in someone to get up to speed as quickly as possible? Something that is done in every corporation is succession planning. The other one is you know, capital projects, of course, are like that, but the concerns, well, let me say it this way, the concerns about where we want to be able to measure ourselves 5 years from now. You know, if we were to say 5 years from now, and I'll just say school committee, not to pick on school committee or anything, how do we know in 5 years this has been a success? And in the side of Milford, how do we know in 5 years that we've achieved the success? And the only way to do that is by having this continual plan. So yeah, things change between municipal government and commercial, but the basic tenets of good planning remain the same, or else we end up with a traffic congestion. We should have been looking at traffic 20 years ago. Had we been looking at traffic 20 years ago, we wouldn't be in the mess where we are today. Had we been looking at downtown revitalization and put into place the right things, look at Holliston, look at Hopkinton, look at all the other communities that have been able to look forward and doing those things. We wouldn't be at a standstill and now say, all right, we've got to start from the beginning with traffic, very difficult problem. With downtown revitalization, we got to start from the beginning. And both of those long-term projects, not going to get done quickly, but we now have to do this.
Well, but Harold, you have to remember, there was a plan to put a bypass road in that would have relieved the traffic on Route 16. It got turned down. Now it's unfortunately, and I shouldn't say unfortunately, now it's a beautiful bike path, so it's never going to be a bypass road, but that was the plan to move the traffic off of Route 16. And we have tried to renovate downtown Milford. Sue Clark wrote many, many, many grants to revitalize the downtown. Now, I agree with you. Does the downtown area need some work? Absolutely. But there has been money spent in the downtown area to revitalize it. I think, again, what needs to happen is that as the leaders of the town, you need to get on the sidewalk and go business to business and say, listen, what can we do? What is your business? First of all, do they even know what the business is? I was sitting in traffic the other day, and there's a new place, the old dumpling place or whatever now is that, I said, wow, what a nice little restaurant that is. The Board of Selectmen need to get on the sidewalk. I don't care if it's monthly or on a Saturday morning with a coffee, and just go door to door and say, hi, I'm Mike Walsh, I'm on the Board of Selectmen, and what can I do to help?
And think about
and
planning.
Let me just say, and Mike, that's exactly why I said that was the number 2 problem that this community faces is economic development, downtown revitalization, is to do exactly what you said. Yes, there have been fits and starts, but the town has lacked the will and the leadership. Look, when I started doing the public transportation, the first year I got into it, I got more doors slammed in my face that no, this town just doesn't going to have, it's not going to have public transportation. And I went everywhere and continued to go. But with determination and a little support here, had a few more, and then I have this group supporting it, and then I have that group supporting it. And then, we have Selectman Buckley and Selectman Murray now supporting it. And we now have some open forums. And now we're ready to go and have a meeting at FinCom, and a good meeting at FinCom, a very detailed meeting at FinCom. But in the end, FinCom voted positively to support it. We brought it to town meeting, and it happened. So now today, through will, leadership, stamina, direction, we now have public transportation in Milford for the first time in many years.
Think about
As we
it.
should.
You all are young enough, because I am, to remember when they put in that 495,
Yeah.
and you would drive up 495.
And why 2 ramps?
Yeah, and you look and saying, are there any cars ever coming on 495? I remember as a kid driving up to the second ramp saying, okay,
Yeah.
I need this to go from one end of Milford to the other, but yet, where would we be without it?
It's a vision.
For those of us who have worked at Digital or Data General or Prime Computer or half a dozen other of those, how would we ever have been able to get to our livelihoods without 495?
Even today.
And so that's why here in Milford, every day a new home gets built in Blackstone Valley. And every home, 2 cars, that means 4 trips per day. On an overloaded Route 16, Route 109, Route 85, that sure, we had a plan for a bypass, but as soon as the bypass got turned down, then we go to the next thing. We don't just give up.
Right,
we go to the next idea. Maybe we have, maybe it's this or maybe it's that. We don't just stop and give up and say, well, we're just going to have bad traffic here in Milford.
Right, but it's important for people to know that the traffic problem on Route 16 is not only a Milford problem. I drive to Mendon every single day. Okay, it's 7 o'clock in the morning, and sometimes it takes me 15 to 20 minutes to turn into the Imperial lot because all the traffic coming down Route 16 from Uxbridge and Douglas and everywhere else. So there's a traffic problem on all of Route 16. What they're going to do about it.
You are so correct. I have been to more regional transportation meetings. People know the problem of Blackstone Valley, and that, for our intents and purposes, Milford's included in that discussion of Blackstone Valley.
Again, when we grew up, if all 9 cars from Uxbridge or Mendon were on the road at the same time, you got held up 30 seconds at the traffic light at Stones. Today, because of the housing prices, whatever, there's a lot of people coming down 16.
Well, what's happened is, it's a very simple thing. When they connected 146 to the Mass Pike, what happens to us being from New England, and I talk to a lot of people about this, people from New York, people from Chicago, people from LA that get transferred in here, they don't think anything. When they're living in those communities, they don't think anything of a 2-hour commute to work.
Right.
We're the ones that say, I got to drive an hour? You got to be kidding me. So they get transferred into Boston, transferred into Worcester, transferred into Providence, and they say, wow, I can drive an hour and a half, and I can buy myself a really nice house
With land,
out in the country. And that's what's happened. So by connecting 146 to the Mass Pike, giving you access to get to Providence, giving you access to get to Worcester, access to get to Boston, the traffic just keeps ramping and ramping and ramping.
now, recently we made some changes in Milford's government. We went from some elected to appointed. How do you feel about the government organization in Milford?
I think Milford's government is fine. I think it's very well done. I think the appointment of the finance director to oversee the tax collector and the treasurer, and I think that was a great move. To what Harold and I talk about, there's an example of kind of using a little bit of private industry methodology. In other words, if we can take one manager and let that one manager oversee 2 or 3 departments, that's a smart move. So that's an area where it works. But there are areas sometimes where you got to be careful because they're 2 totally different departments and they're not going to work together. They have to be held separately.
Would you change anything?
Would I change anything at Town Hall? I would have to say, right now, knowing what I know about Town Hall as 8 years as a school committee and the members, the departments that I've worked with, I would say right now I would not.
Harold, municipal government in Milford.
Well, first, I agree with much of what Mike said. We're fortunate to have a good organization, but more importantly, the folks who work in the various positions, we are truly blessed to have some wonderful people who deeply care about our community and are very expert in what they're doing. The only one area that again, as part of a 15-year plan that I'd want to look at is depending on the growth and the needs of the highway, and I guess we call him the highway surveyor. I guess that's really the technical term, is whether we want to continue to elect the highway surveyor. Now, I'm not saying tonight we should hold an election or not an election, but if the highway surveyor's department continues its growth, I mean, if it adds solar, for example, and it adds this and it adds that, well, then we now need to be sure we have someone in that position, like we have for a director of finance, who has been vetted in all of these areas and not just been elected because. So I'm not saying to
We're
do
going to
that
get some
now.
calls because you're talking about a DPW,
Well,
and that's going to be all.
No, and I've been very careful not to use that
Right.
term. I've just said highway surveyor because of the expanding, role that our highway surveyor has been
I just
taking.
laugh because if you talk to Scotty, he'll say, I haven't expanded in years, but the responsibilities.
The responsibilities have certainly expanded
See,
for
we've
him.
been-
So I'm just saying it's the only area I would take a look at and then make a decision.
To follow up on what Harold's saying, you think about it, for how many years did we have Ronnie Speroni? A love of a man, versed in what he did every single...
Years, decades, millennia.
I want to say 28 that I know of.
Right.
But that was his background. And then we had Shelley LeClaire, who worked with Ronnie for years, and she was very knowledgeable in it. And you got Scott Crisafulli, who worked his way up, became foreman, and, but to Harold's point, you never know. Someone throws their name on the ballot.
Right.
And
that's always the argument. We had
an election.
A young person who wanted to help Milford running for treasurer. I mean, you sit there and say,
That's a good example.
I'm so happy that it worked out that person now is a very valuable contributor to the FinCom.
Right.
And has learned so much. I mean, great attitude, now depth of knowledge. Mm-hmm. And that was funny because when we talked and he said, should I run for school committee? I said, no. Come on the FinCom or another one and learn, because you can learn so much.
Right.
But yeah, I could run if I was popular, and all of a sudden I'm treasurer. And you're handing me how many tens of millions of dollars? And I'm like,
And regulations, so many regulations.
Your turn. I'm going to be mean. Profanity. Those words 2.5 override and debt exclusion.
Let me repeat what Selectman Buckley said. DOA, dead on arrival.
Michael?
I said the same thing the other night. I said, I've been in Milford almost 30 years. I've never seen a 2.5 go to Milford Town Meeting, and you and I agreed on that.
Yeah, we had somebody said they were going to. I said, I'd love to see it. Be
I'm telling you, I want to be sitting there that night.
It'd be comic relief in the middle of the town meeting.
It would be. It would be. I think Milford is financially in such a good state, we never have to, honest to God. And you and I said it the other night, major snowstorm hits and there's all kinds of problems. That's a different situation. You can't ask that question. But would I be in favor of just a general 2.5 override? No. It's not necessary. The town is so well managed.
And we do, just in case, I mean, you think about it, we've got catastrophic insurance with a, I don't know if it's a $1 or $2 million deductible. So even if we lost a $10 million building, you're not hitting our stabilization for all 10 million.
Right. At the end of the day, Al, you know, when you deal with FinCom, and I'll use FinCom as an example because I've been dealing with you guys for years, and I walk out of that room some nights and I say to myself, but at the end of the day, that's why the town of Milford is in the shape it's in, because you and I talk about it's the give and take.
Sure.
I come in as chairman of the school committee and say, Al,
Oh,
I want
this
six
system-
and 6.5. This is what I got to have to run the schools. And you say, well, you're not going to get it. And I say, well, Al, or you know, even Mark, you can't hold me to 2%. I got the biggest number of employees. He says, you're at 2%. And I'm like, but at the end of the day, we all come together. Sure. We put a figure together, and
we make it work.
We make it work.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I mean, I always love this, the mating ritual. When you all come in and we're broke, we're destitute, we're dying.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And if I don't have 90 million out of the 100,
right,
I can't educate. Okay, that's been fun. Now let's talk about what's real.
Yeah, what do we really need?
You know, and somewhere along that line, we come out with a number that we all can live with, and we figure it out.
Yeah.
Emotional issue, immigration.
I feel, again, I keep going back to the other night when you and I spoke. I feel that, first of all, people have to go back and look at what Milford is. Milford is a community that was originally Yankee. The Yankees brought the Irish brought the Italians brought the Portuguese brought the Brazilians. Now we have the new Ecuadorian community. That's what makes Milford such a great community. When you look around, when you take time and you go to the Portuguese club on a Friday night and you see, I'll give you an example. His dad playing cards with his friends, okay, and the sons and daughters are there, and they're the ones that came to this country and got the education, and through education, you're one of them, not being wise, you're one of them, you talk about it all the time. Well, that's what makes America great. So if they're here legally, we have an obligation to educate.
And they follow the rules.
That's right. We have an obligation to educate them. We have an obligation to help them to become good citizens of our community. And they're trying. They really, truly are trying. But they've got to do it the right way, the same way your parents did it, the same way my parents did it. And I say to people that get very critical of them, and unfortunately, they get critical of the Ecuadorian community right now because I guess that's the hot community. And I say to everybody the same thing. Go home tonight, pull up the Statue of Liberty, and read the bottom of the Statue of Liberty. Send me your poor, send me your impoverished. That's what makes this country the great country that it is, because if you go to the Stacy Middle School, every year, Kurt Shady throws the cultures of the world. There's 65 or 60.
I was amazed at how many countries are represented.
And they're all there in their colors, and every single one of those parents will say to me, we came to this country for 2 reasons and 2 reasons only: a better way of life and to educate our children. That's what America is about.
Harold, immigration.
And I want to echo everything Mike just said. My great-grandparents came over from Russia, and our family generations have successfully built better lives for each of the children going forward. The only thing I want to add to that is, of course, we have a problem with illegal immigration, and in particular illegal immigration with regard to persons who commit violent crimes or some sort of crime. I sat with Police Chief O'Loughlin yesterday, and he explained to me exactly how the process worked. And I encouraged him to explain to the community in any way how the process works. And he has it very well documented in terms of how his police force handles those individuals who are undocumented that commit a crime. And it's a marvelous process on how he handles it. You know, I won't attempt to explain everything he says, but you know, we can be assured, and he made sure that I say this tonight, that if anybody has a question about how undocumented persons who commit crimes are handled by our police department, that they should just call him, and they too will walk away knowing that there is an excellent plan and it is being well executed every day by the entire police force.
And Mike, you brought it up. I mean, the only reason I'm here is that Milford welcomed this little old man with $32.80 in his pocket, my grandfather, in the 30s, in 1941 when my mother came to Milford. Otherwise, I'd be in a farm over there.
One night at the high school, Al, we have, you experienced this with your daughter, we have, or you too, senior week, and then Thursday night we bring a guest speaker in. So about 4 or 5 years ago, we had a young gentleman, he was in his early 40s, he was Vietnamese, and as you know, the auditorium is packed, and he starts with a PowerPoint presentation, and he goes, most of you children don't know where the country is that I came from, map of Vietnam. Then he puts on some pictures of the refugee boats, the evacuations in '72 and all this, and I'm like, he doesn't get going, he's gonna lose these kids. And then he goes on to tell the story of how his father took his brother, his sister, and himself to the harbors of Hanoi, put money in their pocket and said, get to America. That's where you need to get to. They got to LA and they were fortunate enough to get sponsored by a family in Upton, who in turn got them into a family in Milford, and he got into Milford High School. The point of the story is he tells his brother was the typical Asian, great in science and great in math. He said, I hated science and I hated math, but a teacher at the high school told me that if I came to school every day and I tried, I could come to his classroom every day after school and draw as much as I wanted to, as Mr. Brennan, the old art teacher. He said, when it was time to go to college, my brother said, you're going to go to Northeastern like me? And I said, no, I'm going to New York to art school. And he said, my brother looked at me and said, you'll never make a thing of yourself. He said, well, ladies and gentlemen, I stand here today as the lead graphic designer for the New York Times.
There you go.
There's the answer.
Harold, got a minute. Milford bus. I think you have an opinion.
Well, I'm very proud of it.
You should be.
Thank you. As Selectman Buckley said, we don't measure everything by spreadsheet, we measure it by community. And of recent, I've spoken to Pat Morrill up at the Milford Housing Authority, and she said, Harold, you got to understand, on any nice day, 6 or 8 or 10 women will get on the bus, go down to Kohl's, spend money, go over to Panera Bread, eat lunch, go back to Kohl's, get on the bus, and come home. And for that was a wonderful day. As Jennifer Walsh, who came after me on the Commission on Disability, has just so eloquently written, there are folks, there are kids, there are adults, let's call them, who are learning to use the bus system so that they can be gainfully employed. Without a public transportation, couldn't do it. We have a hospital here in Milford. We need to be sure to get folks to that hospital so that they don't miss their appointments. And let me just say, the original impetus for having a public transportation came from the hospital, who said, we need to quit missing appointments. Too many people aren't getting here for their flu shots, for their x-rays. Now, the numbers continue to increase, and I expect over the next year that it will continue to increase, and we need now to look at other kinds of transportation. It shouldn't just stop with this one bus. You know, I've promoted the idea of a fast bus to Franklin Forge Park, so for transportation on the commuter rail. And we've talked long and hard about improving our ride. So there is more to do. We've done a good start, but in our 15-year plan, we need to lay out increased opportunities for public
Michael,
transportation.
the bus.
I couldn't agree more. Having lately spending a lot of time at Dana-Farber with my wife, I see the activity at Milford Hospital and Dana-Farber that bus provides. Some of those people could never get there for their treatments or their medical appointments without that bus. So they'd have to depend on somebody to take them. I said the other night is that if you're a citizen of Milford and you're judging that bus by driving down the road and you think it should be like a school bus and it's full, you're looking at it the wrong way. To Harold's point, it's how is the use being used? We're getting ready to open up a new urgent care across the street. We're going to try and relieve the stress out of the emergency room of the common cold, the sore throat, the ear infection. Well, how are those people going to get to the new urgent care center?
Right.
Through the bus.
And I hate to cut you, but we're running right. Jen Walsh, at our planning meeting for Special Olympics and Special Needs, coined the phrase that really resonated with me. It's low ridership, but high impact.
It's a wonderful way of saying it.
Yeah,
Now,
I'm very
I can't
proud of
remember,
that.
I'm showing my age. Did I start with my first question with you?
me.
I thought so. Harold, I'm from Milford. Why should I vote for you?
Well, in the beginning, I outlined 3 reasons: the importance of being the importance of a short or no learning curve, having had a great deal of experience with town government over the last number of years, the understanding that I bring to the needs of the community. But I just want to end on one point. I plan to be a full-time selectman. You know, my lovely wife, Marcia, might call me overly tenacious. I just like to think of myself as diligent. And I plan to bring that same diligence as a full-time selectman to our community through the Board of Selectmen. And I hope through that we can make those improvements that I've talked about tonight so that we do have a better community as we grow and our children grow in the future.
Michael, I'm from Milford. Why should I vote for you?
Leadership, dedication, and results. And I think more importantly, Al, to me, you know, the years I've been on the school committee, there was always this conversation of the 4 to 3, the 4 to 3, the 4 to 3. And I've served with a lot of great people. But Mike Walsh has been able, through leadership, to work through that. And I'm in my 2nd year as chairman. And if you watch the school committee, you don't see that anymore. Okay, that's through leadership. That's through conversation. That's through what Harold said, being transparent. And we need to bring the same thing to the Board of Selectmen. We, as 3 individual people, need to make decisions on a daily basis that improve this community for the people that live in it. And that's what's key.
And as a closing comment on my part, I want to thank you, not just for standing up to help us, but both races, all the candidates have acted in proper manner. You know, I see the 2 of you acting, you've been friends, acting like gentlemen.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see the negative nastiness that has become our electoral process.
Right.
You know, and I've always said there's no room for that in Milford.
None.
So again, thank you for being gentlemen, for running a clean, positive campaign.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you.
And to our 6 loyal viewers, I'll finish like I always do. I'll never ask you to vote for any specific candidate, but I'll beg you, April 4th, get out and vote. Decide which candidate best represents you, who you feel most comfortable with, and then get out there and place your vote. And to all, may God bless. May tomorrow be a better night than tonight. Thank you for everything, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Good night, all.
Not too long since I've been home.